Coming up next on the Breadwinning Mums.
I think I would probably remind the young me, or rather give permission to the young me, to feel the feels more. Often I'll feel something and go, hang on a minute. Is this helpful? Is this going to get me where I need to be? But I am a very practical person. So I think I would probably just remind my younger self, just feel the feels of it.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Breadwinning Mums podcast. This is a place where we debunk the myths of working mums, cheer each other on, and show the world that you can be a mum and still pursue excellence in your chosen area of expertise. Today we are chatting with Victoria O'Reilly, a registered nurse of oncology and palliative care unit, educator, agricultural health and wellness ambassador, and a mum of 3. Vicki shared with us her journey of growing up in a military family in the UK, traveling the world as a cook before finding love and settling down in Zimbabwe, before civil unrest sent her back to the UK, to then finding a new home in Australia. Enjoy this episode with Vicki O'Reilly. Victoria O'Reilly, welcome to the Breadwinning Mums podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. Nice to see you again.
This has been a really long time coming. I'm very excited to have you on the show. Vicki, we met at a Mentors Resilience program a while ago, and you and I got to chatting about how motherhood change our lives and the trajectory of our lives. But before we go into all of the details that makes this, a human condition so interesting, I'm just going to start with a very simple question. Who are you as a human, Vicki?
Gosh, I found this one a bit difficult to think about, actually, because immediately what came to mind was the roles that I have in life. A mother, a partner, a nurse, an advocate for ag well-being, all those things. And then I thought, no, what's the thread through all of it that's me? Adventurous. As a human, I'm adventurous, compassionate, and pretty open-minded. Yeah,
Nice. You've had a really interesting life journey. Can you tell us about that? Where you grew up, where you lived, and how you get to where you are now?
Yes. So my father was in the army. He was in the British Army, and then he was in the Australian SAS during Vietnam. One of the reasons that I was drawn to the Resilience Shield is the boys were in the SAS, so I sort of gravitate towards books to do with that. My mother was a nurse. She worked with Save the Children Fund in Nigeria and Africa. So they always had these really interesting stories when we were growing up, actually, even though they were quite low-key about their achievements. So I was born in Hong Kong because my father was stationed there. And then really raised in the UK and went to boarding school from a very young age. I was 8. Which now I look back on, and when I had my children turning 8, it was just horrifying to think that I went off to school at 8, but that was the norm. Everybody around me on an army patch went to boarding school. I can't think of one person that didn't. So to me, it was the norm. And I was really fortunate that I went to two fabulous schools. And I think if I hadn't have gone to boarding school, I know for a fact I probably would have gone to about 15 schools. So because my parents moved every 2 years. So yeah, I think that sort of set the tone for stability in my life, that I actually realized I replicated a lot with how I mothered and how my husband and I sort of navigated what we ended up going through. So yes, went to boarding school. Wasn't too sure about what I wanted to do when I left school. Thought I wanted to nurse. Went nursing when I was 18. Didn't like it. So much to my parents' slight horror, I just rang up one day from London. They were living in Scotland at the time, and said, "I'm coming home. This isn't for me." And got home, and it was actually the first time I had lived at home with my family since I was 8.
Wow.
So it was really needed, actually. And my sisters were all still at school. I'm one of 4 girls. I'm the eldest. And it was just a really good time, actually. I look back on it. And that's when I decided to go into cooking. So I did I did my cordon bleu cooking course, which all I wanted to do was travel. I look back on it now and go, that's why nursing didn't work. I just needed to spread my wings, travel, get that out of my system. So I worked as a cook in a few different countries, which was lovely, really exciting. Saved up enough money and went to Africa when I was 21, and that's actually where I met my husband. So we met very young. He was farming in Zimbabwe, 3rd generation Zimbabwe farmer. I had a distant relative in Zimbabwe that I had never met. But, you know, when you travel, you look up all the rallies to see where you can stay for free. And I do remember getting to Harare Airport and thinking, oh, my gosh, I don't know what this relative looks like. Please give me a picture. Oh, my word. Anyway, we found each other. We locked up. And really, the rest is history. That was sort of 95. We've, as my husband and I, have sort of had an interesting journey since 95, actually. And I came back to nursing after we had children. So I actually did my nursing in Australia when I was about 30. So, yeah, a few things in between that.
Yeah. So you were 21 when you moved to Africa, met your now husband.
Yes.
How did you both decide to come all the way to Australia out of all places in the world?
Yeah. So we love Zimbabwe. Obviously, it was my husband's place of birth, and he was very passionate about the farming scene there. It was very, very progressive farming in Zimbabwe. But we did get caught up in the political unrest that started in 1997, when Robert Mugabe needed to sort of instigate land reform in the worst possible way, to give money that he'd promised to war veterans who had stood by his side during the civil war in the 80s, when Zimbabwe were fighting for independence, which was correct to fight for some form of independence, but like a lot of wars, often done in the wrong way, the worst possible way. Anyway, when I was there, sort of 97, the rumbling started, and we ended up having to leave in 2002. Our farm was invaded, for want of a better word, as many commercial farms were, in 2000, when I was pregnant with my first daughter. And this was sort of about a few months after the first white farmer murders. In fact, it wasn't just white farmer, lots of farmers being murdered, but obviously the first big one made the news headlines around the world. And it was a very dangerous time. But interestingly, I look back now and go, it's an interesting one. We didn't feel horrendously unsafe, actually. Maybe it's because I was a visitor to the country still. I'd now been there for sort of 4 or 5 years. Sean and I were married. And I had never seen racial tension in Zimbabwe. I'd witnessed it in other countries in Africa, South Africa, but I hadn't felt it and seen it in Zimbabwe. It was, and I'm sure is, we haven't been back since we left, but it was just such a fabulous country. It was a beautiful country, beautiful people, you know, just everyone getting on. And yes, discrepancies between the haves and the have-nots, and countries like that would always be a work in progress. But we were very passionate about farming and providing for the country, providing for very, very loyal staff that we'd had with us on the property for many, many, many years. So we ended up coming to Australia because in 2002, we had to leave very quickly. So we packed up. I left with Alice, my daughter, and my husband followed a little time afterwards when they really did take over the property. We went to England actually for a couple of years. Obviously, that's where I'm from. We had a British passport, and we thought it was probably a good place to start, just to sort of bed down and just take a breath. Where to next? And that's when, for me, motherhood really came into its own. You know, being in Zimbabwe with one child, I had someone to help me with the housework and all those lovely little things that you get when there's lots of people who want a job. Getting back to the UK with now 2 children, because when I left, I was heavily pregnant with the second when we had to leave quickly. Yeah. And I just decided then, golly, I'm just going to have to become Mother Earth here and just keep life simple and appreciate being in a safe space, actually. It was only then that really my husband and I started to sort of, it's often the way, isn't it? When you look back at something that you realize was quite traumatic, you almost get slightly overwhelmed, if anything, more overwhelmed about how scary it was than you were at the time of going through it.
Of course, yeah.
So we just sort of lay low for a couple of years, actually. My husband did a master's in sustainable agriculture. He was very lucky to get onto a master's program and get a scholarship. So he did that and worked in a factory, and I looked after the children, and I did freezer meals for a couple of the local farmers.
Oh, wow.
So that was that. Roll on 2 years, and my husband was actually presenting at a farming conference in the UK, and someone came up to him at the end and said who they were, and they said, look, we have a family farm in Australia. You wouldn't happen to know anybody who would be interested in doing, you know, farm managing for us. Yeah. And my husband just went straight away, yep, I do. That would be me. So he came home and he said, look, you know how we always spoke about going to Australia at some point? Well, I think I might have got us a gig there. So, yeah, we both went off for an interview, and by then I was actually pregnant with our 3rd child. So we had to wait for Hannah to be born. And then we emigrated to Australia in 2004 when Hannah was 6 weeks old.
Wow.
And we went straight to this farm in Margaret River. So we were very lucky. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't a wine farm. It was a beef farm. But it was great. It felt very much that's exactly where we were meant to be. So, I mean, that's, golly, 21 years ago.
Years ago.
Yes.
Wow, what an amazing life. So was Sean able to save part of his family farm, or did he lose it all during the transition?
We lost it all, yes. It's, one of those bizarre parts of history. It's happened before in Africa. Sometimes compensation occurs. There was just too many. I mean, when we were farming there were around 4,000 commercial farmers, black and white, predominantly white. Not that it's about that, but I know the press always bring up, you know, that part of it. And then by the time we left in 2002, I believe there was around 500. I believe maybe now there's only a couple of hundred. To be honest, we sort of removed ourselves pretty quickly. I think the trauma of missing it so much, which we did at every turn in those first few years. And I know my husband still yearns for his old life.
It was probably the injustice of it all, the fact that he didn't do anything to make it happen, make
Yeah,
it a
and
little
I
bit
think
harder to accept and move on from.
absolutely. And what sat so uncomfortably with us and gave my husband, golly, a lot of sleepless nights was the thought that our staff, the farm staff who had had their homes there
Mm,
for generations,
mm,
would have thought we had abandoned them.
yeah,
And that was awful to
yeah,
have to deal with. We had very loyal staff
yeah,
who had come from surrounding countries years and years ago. So they were
yeah,
almost slightly stateless.
yes.
And when we had to go because we weren't allowed to be there,
Mm,
um, that felt dreadful. I mean,
yeah,
there was only so much we could do for them and give them, you know, tractors, whatever. We had everything confiscated from us, so we were
mm,
left with very little to leave them and give them. And when I left, I had a lovely girl in the house, woman. She wasn't a girl. She was in control of everything in our house. And I left a few weeks before Sean did because I was heavily pregnant. And she said to Sean, you know, when will I see Vicki, the madam, again? And Sean said, when we're allowed back on our farm. And that was that. It felt very, very disloyal for us to be able to get on a plane and go,
mm,
and for our loyal workers not to be able to do that. And
yeah.
that haunted us for quite a long time. Yeah.
A while. Yeah,
But we were fortunate to be in a position to make another life somewhere. Yeah.
yeah. That's good. My
Yeah.
parents went through something quite similar. It's not exactly the same cause and effect, but the
Mhm.
context was quite similar in that they built something out of nothing.
Yeah.
And at the end of the 90s, I saw that something went back down to nothing. They had
Okay.
to let go of a huge factory. They used to manufacture sportswear for well-known brand like Adidas and Nike. And then for that to have to be shut down, let go of the, hundreds of people that used to work and live in the factory itself, and then move all the way to Australia, create a new life from nothing again.
Mm,
It took them some time. I remember I used to take my mum to see a counselor during the day because she was depressed. My dad
mm,
was there, but he wasn't really there, if you know what
mm,
I mean.
mm.
I think the thing that really got them back was when they started just doing any type of work, any small work that gives them that ability to maybe feel their own worth in
Yeah, and
life.
that's the control. The only thing you can control is what you do with your time
Hmm.
when you are really trying to claw back
Hmm.
um, your purpose.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. What did you do? What did you and Sean do during those first 3 years that has really helped you to get get you back on track?
Yeah, I think there's nothing like rolling up your sleeves and just throwing yourself into hard work.
Hmm.
I was a stay-at-home mum. Obviously, when we came to Australia, I wasn't a nurse yet. Um, Maybe I don't actually have any regrets really in life, but I think probably the one thing that I felt then was, golly, why did I give up nursing when I was 18? If I was a nurse, I'd be able to go straight on and do some good work. But then again, living on a farm, you know, you're a great support. I genuinely believe that, in fact, my husband would definitely attest to this, that farmers, you know, if they're male, and indeed female, but we often realize that a lot of farmers are men, are so much more successful when they have a good, strong, supportive partner by their side, whoever that may be. So I really supported Sean. Actually, that was my job, and I wanted it to be that way. So, and it sort of got us through. It was, I was there for the girls all the time. We were on a very small little budget because 20 odd years ago, farm managers didn't get paid very much at all. But we got our house. And I think once again, we were also able to home in on, let's keep life simple. You
Mm.
know, let's just not overcomplicate it. Let's just keep things simple. And we did. And I really think that came back in dividends over the years when we, had other big decisions to make, whether it's schooling your children a certain way or moving states. Sean and I have moved to 3 different states in Australia over the last 20 years for jobs. And each time we've done it, and maybe again, I got this from my parents because we moved so often, keep things simple. Repetition with regards to sort of providing safety and reliability for your children. It doesn't really matter where you're living or how big or small your house is. If you all sit down for a meal together in the evening, yay. If they know that, at the end of the day, whether they're 2 or 16, you end the day by having a meal, doing your homework or reading a story to your child, brushing your teeth and going to bed. Doesn't really matter where that happens. And I've really noticed that, when we've been traveling with our children when they were younger, whether it was when we were emigrating here with 3 tiny little people on an aeroplane, putting them in their pajamas before you hop on the plane, make sure they've had their tea, brush their teeth. That's the routine for the night. So routine, I think, for me has been a massive thing with motherhood.
Yeah.
And that got us through those sort of first 3 or 4 years, especially in Australia, of let's just enjoy the routine of having a small family, and keeping it simple. Yeah.
Yeah. I hope it stays simple, but it didn't.
No.
Because you went on and do something else.
Yes.
So what happened after you came here?
So, I just decided, I suppose I often joke about it, after a couple of years when we were thinking about now it's time to leave the farm. Sean had this master's. What should he do with it? He really wanted to sort of really use it. He really is very passionate about agriculture and sustainability in that space. And I thought then, golly, I'm going to have to get something up my sleeve. So I actually started nursing again. So I went back and did my degree, and I did it online mostly until we moved to Perth. And I've been really fortunate in that I started my sort of full-time work as a nurse when my youngest started school. So I do look back at those sort of 6 years, 8 years, whatever it was, where I was sort of definitely playing mum and just doing the odd bit of cooking for people's freezers as being in, and luckily I felt it at the time, being in a really fortunate position to be present every day for my children. And get that balance right. It's wonderful to be present, but they also need to know that you're not always available. It's a dance, isn't it? With the sort of stages children are at, and now my girls are in their 20s. I recognize that sort of dance throughout the different stages you have with your children, and how you need to adapt and change and sort of be fully available and present then, a little bit less, when they're sort of the teens, but at the same time, they know that you're there and you need to press buttons so that you can ask the right questions. And now that they're sort of young adults, available, but maybe not the moment they ring. Sometimes I'm in a meeting, I'm not picking up that phone. You're in your 20s. I'm not sure what's gone wrong at your end, but I'm sure you can cope.
Yeah.
So I went on to do nursing. We came over here, and life got really quite hectic. My husband ended up working for a big corporate, let's just put it that way, and worked incredibly hard, did very, very well, but it involved him being away a lot. And it took its toll over the time, actually. But again, that's sort of part of the story of, well, I suppose our story. Yeah.
Yeah. And what was your journey as a nurse like afterwards?
Very, very rewarding. I've been incredibly lucky. I sort of...
Especially the area that you are working in, it's extremely interesting.
So oncology and palliative care, I slightly fell into it, to be honest. When you graduate, you have to pick a grad program, and you have to do something medical, something surgical. I really wanted to do neurosurgery. I got that as my second rotation, but I got my first rotation in oncology in a cancer hospital in Perth, and loved it, if you can say that about anything to do with cancer. It was it's been such a good reference point for me over the last 15, 20 years, to be honest. Whenever anything has been happening in my personal life, I tell you what, when I walk onto the ward or walk into the day chemo unit and I see my patients waiting patiently, fighting the fight, being brave every day and showing up, wow, does it make me go, hold up there, Vicki.
Gives you a perspective, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I am so grateful that I use it to actually remind my children, and I'm not the one that goes, no one's dying in this family, what's going on, people, you've got nothing to worry about. Again, it's making sure that whatever their problems are given true airtime, but at the same time reminding them of perspective. And I think this sort of the power of the power of our mind. I mean, crikey, we can be in the worst position ever, and if you can actually tap into all sorts of things like resilience, that's, I mean, the course that we did, it just confirmed so many things and questions that I had, that I've just found it a fascinating journey to be involved in, actually. It's
What's the most touching experience you've ever faced as your time in the palliative care?
It is such a privilege to share space with a family or a partner, or even if you have a patient who doesn't have anyone by their side when they are taking their last breaths. It is a sacred space. It is extraordinary to bear witness to how people cope with those moments. We see the full range of emotions, as you can imagine. And for me, often the most touching thing is observing different levels of bravery in that space as well. And some of the wonderful things that I've heard loved ones say to their special person who's taking their last breaths have just blown me away.
What would they say?
So you get, I was just thinking of the one that will always blow me away, and I know why it sort of resonated with me, because at the time my marriage was in a really hard place, and this lovely gentleman, they were an older couple, he was holding her hand and he called me into the room and he said, look, I think maybe her breathing's changed. And I'd already talked to our carers about how breathing can change towards the end, and this is what it can sound like, and please come and get us at any time and we can sit with you, whatever you need. Anyway, he'd called me in, and indeed the lady's breathing had changed, and I was there when she passed away, and he was holding her hand. Still makes me feel emotional. And he said to her, and he looked at me and he said, she was the most wonderful wife and partner. And it got me in that moment. And I just felt so privileged for someone to just share that and be so comfortable to do that. And even to this day, it resonates so strongly with me because, when you share a life with someone, it's not that you need to be noticed for the part that you've played as a wife or a mother. You don't actually, I don't need recognition, but it is lovely when you're doing something good for someone else, whether it's really pleasing your children or your partner, or even if it's down to getting it right, and you're really explaining something to someone and they just get it and you feel so seen. With that just comment from that gentleman just wrapped up so many things. And what we also often find is when people have said goodbye to their loved ones and they come out of the room, they often lean in and give us as nurses huge hugs, not just to say thank you, but just I don't know, maybe maybe it's something that happens in grief where you want someone else to feel better when you're feeling awful. You really want someone else to feel better. It's a nice antidote, I think. It's back to that old saying of what I used to say to my children when they were teenagers: get out of your head and into your life. It's good to understand your head, give it some contemplation, but sometimes it can be weary being in your head. Get out of your head, into your life. What can you do for somebody else? Because it's a really good antidote, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think it provides distraction. It's nothing better than doing something good for someone else.
It gives action. Yeah, people do that in AA as well, I think. When
Yeah,
you're stuck in your own head, do something for someone else.
yeah, yeah.
Mm.
It's so simple, It's distraction, and it's gives you all the endorphins, and it
What
just takes your head away. Yeah.
what was the last breath like? Did you notice any shift in the room or in your own sensation?
Um, Again, it depends on the energy of the room. I have to say, more often than not, by the time someone does take their last breath, and we're talking about in a quite a controlled environment. This is a hospital that is a cancer ward, so it's not ED, it's not chaotic, it's relatively controlled. That said, depending on where the carers are at, that dictates the sort of tone of the room, to be honest. And we as nurses have to be really aware of that, and not to add in our own energy. I mean, I teach my students the fine line about showing your vulnerability to your patients, because that shows them that you are invested in their feelings. But the last thing your patients need to see, or rather the carers in the last moment, are you as a nurse falling apart with tears. This is their moment of shock and grief, no matter how prepared they are. Us as nurses need to be the grounding space in that moment. But yeah, it's the last breath type thing. It just happens. It just happens. And I think a reminder that death is final. It's just final. And again, something I say to my girls is, and people say this all the time, so it's not just me, but we have one life, and you have a responsibility to make it worthy, make yourself worthy of that life that we've been given, and to contribute to the world and to your fellow man, and to make use of what you've been gifted, in your circumstances, because you have what you have, or you can have very little, but you hear the most wonderful stories from people during those last few hours, whether they are from their family members, or I've looked after people who've still been sort of being able to have a little bit of a chat in the day that they pass away. So the energy in the room can be very different, but I have to say, I haven't had an experience where the energy in the room has been filled with anger or anything like that. There's been lots of emotion, not necessarily calm emotion, lots of tears at times and a bit of shock, but the peace is usually there. Most people feel relief and peace on behalf of their family member. But as I said, I have only been around end of life in a controlled environment.
Yeah.
So I'm sure it's very, very different in other environments. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that is our aim in oncology. We want our patients and their family members to feel that they are in a controlled and safe space, so that they can grieve and connect as they should towards the end. Yeah.
If there was one thing that was quite common in that moment, between all patients across different um, uh, uh, diagnoses, what would it be based on your observation and experience so far?
My observation and experience. Um, I think probably a common thread is I am constantly told by patients, not so much towards the end, because by then it's about they're not really having deep chit chats.
Mm-hmm.
But prior to that, the common thread really is life is precious. I don't usually hear people talk about regret, actually. If anything, it's more regretting what they haven't done as opposed to what they have done. And I actually feel that. I really do. And I think I was talking about this the other day to someone about regretting things that we shouldn't have done. And I said, when I was at boarding school and we used to have midnight feasts. I mean, clearly we were hungry. We were looking for excitement in my life. And even at senior school, we would spend ages planning these feasts. And we would literally set the alarm at midnight. We would all get our Twix bars and whatnot. And we would find the weirdest place in the school to all tramp down without getting caught to unpack this feast. And when that alarm would go off or someone would shake you in your bed and go, come on, Vicky, we're good to go. Let's get down to the careers room to eat our Mars bars. And then the alarm would go off and I'd think, oh, God, the last thing, I'm so tired. And in my head, even as a young person, I'd go, oh, you regret it. When you're 50, you regret not going and enjoying in the fun. So just get on and do it. So, yeah, I think the thread probably is take all the opportunities you can and lead a good life, really. Yeah. But I generally observe a lot of peace, actually. I will say that. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. What an amazing journey you've had.
Yeah, it's been interesting. Yeah.
I want to take us back to that young Vicky. What was she like?
Gosh. I think fun. I was a bit of a silly child, and I think I drove my parents potty with my questions, and I was constantly told I was cheeky. Actually, right now, and I go, oh, I don't think I was cheeky. I think I just asked a lot of questions.
Yeah.
And I vowed I'd never say to my children, because I say so. My mother said that to me a lot. Obviously, inevitably, I did, I'm sure. Once, my child had asked the same question 5 times why they need to do something, I would eventually go, just because I am just telling you to do it. It's time. So, yeah, I think sort of cheeky and sort of fun. And I think looking back now, I realize I was actually quite brave. Without realizing it, I think going off to boarding school and just sort of slightly taking it on the chin. Yeah, that was quite brave, I think, for all of us that were doing that. Yeah.
Did you know that you were going to be a mum or work in your career as that 8-year-old who went to the boarding school?
I didn't know that I was going to be a nurse, although my mother was a nurse and my granny was a nurse and I had a nurse outfit. And my mother does say, oh, you used to say he was going to be a nurse, but I never felt that I'm going to be a nurse. My younger sister is a very passionate nurse and she felt that deeply. I sort of had to grow into it, really. With regards to being a mum, I think I never decided one day I would like to have children. I think it was just rather arrogant of me just to go, oh, I'll have children. One day when I'm grown up, when I have children, it would be that type of conversation. So probably never a deciding moment. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. It's funny, isn't it? I had a conversation about this a couple of weeks ago with Alka Joshi, who is the author of the Jaipur trilogy. Her novel has been picked up by Reese Witherspoon's book club.
And she said, the podcast, actually, a bit of it. I haven't finished it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. She was 8 or 9 years old when she said, I was in this playground and I heard all these girls, when I have kids, blah, 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 blah. And she thought to herself, well, how do you know you're going to have kids?
Yeah.
I don't know. And I thought that's really interesting because I never had that moment when I questioned the status quo and question whether if that status quo will fit me. I just sort of took it on board. I had two older brothers, they had
Yeah.
kids. The cousins before me had kids, and so I will go in and have kids. But it's interesting, isn't it? For some of us, it is an option, and I think it's
Yes.
probably a good thing to see it as an option because when it does happen in your life, you fully embrace it for what it is, all of the highs and the lows.
Yeah, yeah. It is interesting because my eldest daughter said to me when she was a teenager, young teenager actually,
Hmm.
just out of the blue one day we were chatting and must have been talking about what our fears were.
Hmm.
She turned to me and said, "My greatest fear is not to be able to have children." And I
Hmm.
was absolutely flabbergasted because I can't say as a teenager I ever thought
Yeah.
about children or being a mum.
Yeah.
Thought that I didn't want it, but I hadn't given it any time as to whether I did. It was just probably something I was going to morph into. And I
Hmm.
remember thinking, gosh, Al, you've really given that some thought.
Yeah.
I mean, she's a primary school teacher, so I think children were always on her mind.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting. I think it is a good thing that it's the status quo, like you say, it needs to be sort of questioned
Hmm.
so that people can sort of decide, well, actually, I'm not having children and not feel. I know a couple of my friends who haven't been able to have children had to really work at the notion of not feeling like they didn't have a full life.
Hmm.
That was a work in progress for them, and I totally get that.
Yeah.
That would have been a work in progress for me as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. So, what is life like for you right now?
Gosh, so it's good actually. It's I saw someone on some program the other day saying they must have been similar age to me actually, or maybe a bit younger, talking about, the combination of menopause and blah, blah, blah. We're empty nesters.
Oh,
So
yeah.
for
Okay.
us, that's an interesting space to be in. So life is good. It's been definitely a journey over the last 25 years with all that we had to go through and navigating a change in our marriage for a bit, and working through our own issues. And for us, sort of meeting so young and surviving something together and creating a new life definitely took its toll. And obviously, it's an interesting concept, isn't it? That, two people meet and they go through life together, especially when they're young, and then they have to still keep growing. They still becoming who they're supposed to be. So you sort of morph together for certain things, and then that desire to sort of grow in different directions, because guess what? We're different human beings. And we do things at different paces. I mean, my husband will often say to me, "You're just 5 steps ahead all the time. I can't keep up." And I'm like, really? I don't think I'm that fast. So we grew at different times, and I think that sort of played a part in it. But we sort of have come full circle, and I like to think that this next stage, what I call it, much to people, what my husband's horror maybe, marriage number 2, as Esther Perel says, she's been in 4 marriages within the same marriage. And
Yeah.
I think, I like that. I slightly get that. So no, life is good. Empty nesting, although luckily for us, our children keep reappearing. Look after their animals, or to help fix a car. I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah.
They're all quite, within sort of 3-hour radius. So 2 of them are off working now, and as my husband says, they're off the payroll. Car breaks down,
Yeah.
and one's still at uni. So she comes back for holidays and stuff. So yeah, I'm enjoying my teaching, and working on the sort of next stage of my project that I want to do for agriculture, health and well-being.
Yeah.
Something that's really, really, it's interesting, when people say, how do you make use of all the bits and pieces you do throughout your adult life, whether it's sort of different roles within a profession, and different roles that you play in your personal life. The privilege you get to have when you're sort of in, I don't know, your 50s or 60s, you start to be able to sort of put it all together and go, gosh, what can I do with this? What are my passions and what are the things that I've really enjoyed doing throughout my career or raising children? I think when I did a postgrad in business psychology and really focused on workplace wellbeing within the agricultural sector, I think possibly knowing that not only the sort of trauma of Zimbabwe that took place for Sean and I, but living and breathing on the land, in the land rather, it's a complete existence. A couple working on the land although you love what you're doing, there's often no separation from work and life.
And life, yeah.
And one of the big things that we sort of noticed, and I felt this as a farmer's wife, the stresses of, your partner working out there all day. It's only a 2-minute walk often from their place of work in the workshop yard to the family home. Now, how do they decompress?
Yeah, they don't.
They don't. So, of course, all that comes into the family home is all the drama that's gone on during the day with every piece of equipment that broke or who did something silly and da-da-da-da-da. It comes straight into your family home and it can get it can suck out a lot.
Yeah.
So for me, I just think education around personal well-being for each person, the role of the farmer out there, the role of the partner who's supporting that. And that takes dialogue and communication, doesn't it? Which, of course, is a learned skill, especially, I suppose, for my age group. I don't know. I mean, I look at my young girls, in their 20s, and they're so well educated now on being comfortable with talking about feelings and certain dialogues and communication and when to actually stop. I mean, I hear the way they tell me how they talk with their partners when they both feel that they're sort of running on empty. They have such educated conversations about, okay, can you do this? Because I can't do that. And I just think, oh my gosh, I did not know about that in my 20s and 30s. I just, to be perfectly honest, thought my role was, and I was happy for it, to just keep providing and giving and supporting, as opposed to going, oh gosh, some batteries might be handy here. I'm hoping that that's something that will gather some pace, and I'm just enjoying being in a position to have a bit of freedom to do this, to be honest.
That's amazing. Yeah, I love the way you embrace each role, each stages as they come. You touched on something that I found quite interesting, and this is something that we had a conversation about as well previously, but different stages, different dynamics of both personal well-being and the dynamics of your relationships. And feel free to share as much or as little as you'd like. But I find that concept of divergence and convergence quite interesting. At what stage do you decide that it's time to diverge? And at what stage do you decide that it's time back to converge based on how you feel and what you observe about the other party as well?
Look, from my personal perspective, we slightly went in different directions when the communication stopped happening. So I think I probably personally realized I was going on a trajectory with sort of having a bit more freedom to do a bit more of my work. And time is a big factor, two people working really hard to provide for their family. And time is just, where's the time to sit down sometimes and have the really hard talks that often involve a bit of an argument, really, don't they? And then you're aware, well, children are around. We don't want them to hear arguments. One thing I have actually realized is just as important as sort of arguments and what have you, and the disagreements and but I want to do this, but I need to be there for that meeting, blah, blah, is how you resolve it and your kids bearing witness to that resolving. I think that's important. I mean, I'm talking about kids in the fact that my children were teenagers when my husband and I were navigating sort of what to do about how differently we viewed the next few years. That I didn't feel I don't feel the guilt of them having borne witness to this dilemma that we had as a couple. It was not nice for them to be part of at times, because no one likes instability when everything's been very stable. But I think the reconciliation around when my husband and I decided, hang on a minute, let's make some changes. Let's really thrash this out, and we were given the opportunity to do that because our girls were a little bit older. So we were able to sort of have some time apart, do some inner work, have some different conversations, and get used to a different type of dialogue, to be perfectly honest. The fact that our children were able to witness that was actually quite important. It's given it a sort of sincere, thoughtful feel to it, I suppose. When they and I think it's important. We only learn things by observing.
Yeah, that's a good point.
We learn how to do something, or we learn what we do not want to do by observing. I was very lucky. I had a very happy childhood, but my parents had a very hard marriage too. And I observed things there that I knew I didn't want to do when I was older. So I sort of think that, reconciling and being a little bit honest with your adult children or teenagers at times. Obviously, you have to, really gauge where they're at, obviously, and what they can cope with. And, they are not our best friends. They are not our confidants.
Yeah.
It's not their role. I personally believe that. But at the same time, an element of truth and honesty is, I think, really valid. And I know that our children respect my husband and I through what we've recreated, actually. They may not like it all the time, but that's, normal. So it's a dance, isn't it? And it's a dance. It's a bit like sort of the dance of, I suppose, as a woman and a wife and a mother and all those roles that we have. And I've had to have this conversation with my husband, because obviously he grew up in an environment in Zimbabwe that was probably, I often say, you're in the 90s, but you were sort of in the 50s. And that sort of role playing that happened, that I sort of participated in, because that's what I'd seen my parents do. And I suppose I'm quite outspoken with my girls now, going, you're fortunate that you're in this environment now where it's not even the narrative that I had growing up, which is women have got to forge their way and you've got to be independent and you've done something wrong if you're not. And being a stay-at-home mum is, oh my gosh, what are you doing? I was sort of in my 20s when that narrative was happening, whereas my children have sort of been through that. They don't even know about that. They're just in the space of, to be honest, equality. Certainly with their relationships. I know my middle daughter is in agriculture. She is a graduate agronomist. And obviously in rural Australia, she is still, unfortunately, coming across inequality and a lot of sexism. It's still there, and it's something that is pretty confronting for her. But I'm hoping that she's robust and equipped enough to not puff up, as Brene Brown would say, and not shrink. Just stand comfortably in the middle and know your worth, But
wow. That's a lot there. Thank you,
There is
Vicki,
a
for
lot,
sharing.
yes, and I'm sure I diverted.
No, I think it's a really good point. Sometimes the things that we avoid thinking we do because we want to protect the kids may not
Yeah,
necessarily be necessary. And in fact, it may be empowering them for future
yeah,
interactions, as long as I think it's done, as you mentioned, in a way that is that caters to their age, but also done
absolutely.
authentically and respectfully.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm,
Yes.
awesome. Okay, so we spoke about your current work. We spoke about where you are heading towards in terms of your new project. I also wanted to know how are you juggling work and family lives, not necessarily now as an empty nester, but when work was so hectic before the girls all
Yeah.
move out of the home. Were there any special tips or routine that works for you and your husband?
Gosh, I think I look back now and go, continuity was actually quite important,
Hmm.
and predictability and rhythm. Um, and I sort of hoped at the same time that my children were flexible enough to manage when there would be, a problem. And actually they were. But I think, without sounding too old-fashioned, sort of the roles that Sean and I had really worked.
Hmm.
And our children sort of knew that I worked. So Sean worked away, I worked, but I made it so that my work was sort of, I was accessible. So
Yep.
it was that I could drop children at school, go to work, collect children, go back to work. So we had the conversation as a couple. We can't both have high flying jobs not in the same town. If
Hmm.
we're both flying off in all directions, is that going to work for us as a family? And we said no, that's not. And Sean had a really good job that he was really good at, and which obviously helped pay for our life because a nursing salary doesn't do that. So for me, the juggle was knowing that, or rather, the tips I'd have was routine and a bit of predictability. And I have to say, I think the one thing that was really important to me and for my family and the girls, because it was usually just mostly us during the week, was that time around cooking dinner. I really firmly believe it. We'd all come in at sort of 6, and I love to cook. They're not elaborate meals, and I don't love to cook as much as I used to because,
It's just the two of you. You can
yeah,
afford
I
to
mean,
just eat
I
out.
do.
It's
Luckily, Sean likes
yeah,
cooking, so that's cool.
yeah.
But that time that you have in the kitchen, whatever I cooked for dinner had to happen within an hour. You know,
Mm,
and I do like to sort of cook from scratch, and it's amazing what you can put together in an
mm,
hour.
mm.
And the girls would pretty much be sitting at the dining room table or on the kitchen or the counter or whatever, either doing a bit of homework or just having a chat. And it was that one-on-one, it was that sort of connection time. It's a bit like driving in a car with your teenager.
Yes, I know what you
Get
mean.
so
Yeah.
much more out of them when you're not eye to eye. you
Yes.
know and that happened in the kitchen at home, and that was a pretty, no matter what was going on, even if we were only eating at sort of 8 o'clock, much to my children's horror, we eat rather
Mm,
late in our family, that routine was a given.
mm.
And I think that to me was something that was really important, and I think it really helped with the flow of our family during those years where everyone is vying for your attention as a mum. You're wanting to crack on and feel something in your job. You also need to be present for your children. You're also trying to, make a relationship work or whatever. Um, so yeah, that hour was an important space for us, cooking meals together. Yeah,
Yeah.
so that would be.
Excellent. How did you fill your cup though, as a mum with husband
Mhm.
that travels for work, with three girls, with a work as well that you need to go through? How do you make it all happen?
Um, I don't know. I mean, small little moments of, I must say, solitude were really important and very rare. So that time where I'd be driving from the hospital to pick up children from school, and I often say this to my students, you have to find a moment in your day when you are, and it's the same with when I sort of talk about the separation between the farmer getting from the farmyard to the home. you need that period of solitude so that you can sort of shake off one role and space and step fully into the next. So I really looked for those moments. So especially when the girls were older, being able to go for a walk on my own without a toddler. I mean, the first time that happened, when, crikey, I look back now, I waited far too long for that first walk on my own, but that was just gold. It was like, oh my gosh, I can actually walk at pace.
Yeah.
And it's just me. And I have a podcast in my ear. This is just glorious. So I suppose looking for those little moments, of solitude. I didn't have family here, so that was hard. But at the same time, we weren't pulled in many directions, as I know a lot of people often are when they have family close by all the time and they have lots of family commitments. That's wonderful, but it can eat up quite a bit of rare alone time or whatever you need to do to, some people get a lot of energy out of meeting with people and having coffees. I like that. That doesn't fill my cup, to be honest. Filling my cup is about a bit of solitude, sitting on the deck in the warm sun with a coffee and my dogs.
Same here.
That to me is just, I will never tire of what I feel in those moments, So just always looked for those little moments.
Yeah, I agree. I take just a quick run around the block as well. During those transition between work and home, and it's been a game changer for me.
Yeah, definitely.
You mentioned before menopause, and again, share as much or as little as you would like. My auntie, she went through her perimenopause, I think about 5 or 6 years ago, and she's just been giving me, she's 9 years older than me. She's been giving me a lot of tips about how to prepare for the peri that is about to come. How has it changed your life, I guess, because it is a life-changing phase.
It is a life-changing thing, isn't it? Look, I have to say, I had never really delved into it. I just sort of, I don't know.
You're a very practical person.
Maybe my head was in the sand, but I didn't really listen to podcasts about it. And my mother wasn't the type of mother that chat about that sort of stuff. Maybe if I was closer, we might, because I would have asked her and she would have given me honest answers. I suppose I never saw my mother make a big thing out of it. So she did have a lot of hot flashes, which I think drove her potty. And she was of the era where HRT had just come out, and then it was suddenly so much of a cancer risk you couldn't be on it. So of course, she came off it, and I think that sort of made her menopause sort of last a little bit longer, actually. But I suppose I didn't maybe realize that I was in it. And I look back now in my sort of mid-40s and go, oh, gosh, I think maybe there was a few symptoms there that I didn't even know about. To be honest, I'm 51 now. I, touch wood, I'm not having too much of a hard time of it. I hope that doesn't change. Just the normal moments of warmth, let's just put it that way, and I'm actually a cold fish.
Okay.
So I then have moments I go, oh my God, I'm just boiling from the inside out. I think I don't feel irritable. So that's a good thing. I think one thing I possibly have noticed, and maybe it's just because I'm now aware, there's so much out there about menopause and perimenopause and things like that, which is great. But I think like all popular themes, you have to choose and pick how much you're going to listen to and what you're going to take, because there's an awful lot out there. And I probably wasn't aware that this might be one of the symptoms, but I'm not a remotely anxious person. But I have had moments, I have to say, where I've had this sort of, it's almost like you feeling of being wired, which I sort of sit back and go, oh, is that a hormone thing? I'm thinking that that's something that's sort of bubbling up inside of me that's just feeling a little bit off keel maybe every now and again. And I can only put that down to being, hormones mucking around, I'm thinking. But at the moment, I'm okay. I mean, I've always been a good sleeper. I'm very lucky. And I've always thought, oh, if I wake in the night and I'm not asleep, then I can't be that tired. So sleep will come when it's supposed to, I suppose. I'm very fortunate. I can survive on sort of 6 hours, possibly 7 of sleep. So I can do a night duty and sort of crack through the next day and fall in a heap by 10 o'clock the following night. Still function. So I'm quite lucky in that space. Don't give me 2 night duties in a row though, because then I sleep for like 48 hours and then I'm just unsafe.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, wow. Okay. That's good. It looks like you had a good, if I can call it that, a good run of it.
I'll probably eat my words,
No. Let's fingers crossed it'll stay that way.
Yeah.
So I want to go back to that really young Vicky, the one who is about to go to boarding school when she was 8 years old and part from her parents, the stable, rock in her life, knowing all of the wealth of knowledge that you know now as someone who's traveled the world, as a cook, someone who's moved to Zimbabwe, met the man, got married, moved back to the UK, moved to Australia, knowing all of that, what one advice would you give that young Vicky?
Oh gosh, I think I would probably remind the young me, or rather give permission to the young me, to feel the feels more. I think very much I am obviously a product of the way I was raised, but I was raised in an environment that, and I think it was actually a protective factor. I think it was probably a good thing that I didn't feel the feels at the time of the enormity of going away to school and being homesick and knowing how to sort of squash the feeling in your throat when you want to cry, but it's just not coming out because you don't know what to do with it. I was raised in an environment where showing your emotion wasn't really the done thing. It was not helpful. And I still sometimes actually feel that, often I'll feel something and go, hang on a minute. Is this helpful? Is this going to get me where I need to be? But I am a very practical person. So I think I would probably just remind my younger self, just feel the feels of it. It's that's probably would have been something that I would have maybe then been a bit more comfortable with that as I was, becoming a young adult. Yeah. Probably.
Yeah. Awesome. And one question that I always ask all guests in the show is, what is your alpha mom song?
Gosh, so many. I love music. We listen to it a lot in our house. Our girls, we used to have dance-offs after dinner when they were little, get the bees out before the calming routines, of going to bed. So over the years, it's always been different things in my life for different reasons, but it's usually always something big and loud. I actually something came on the other day. It was about 2 or 3 months ago. I was listening to Spotify and I just used the DJ who just makes mixes. And the song by Eurasia, Respect.
Oh yeah.
Not Aretha Franklin's one.
Yeah.
But, the Eurasia one came on, and maybe it was just sort of the sort of late 80s, 90s in me that went to the beat. But I was like, oh gosh, I've forgotten how good this song is. That I cranked that one up. But yeah, we played a lot of music in the car. We've always driven long miles to school and work and things, so there's always been quite a lot of music. But yeah, Coldplay, U2, strong women stuff. Yeah, but music's great, isn't it? To sort of get your mojo going when you're moving into a meeting, or cranking yourself up to sort of hit the ground running when you go to work, or indeed, you're a runner. I'm not. It's just my lifelong goal to actually be able to run 4Ks without stopping. I've never finished it.
Yeah. I'd just go for it. Go for it.
My sister's a runner. She's amazing, and she just is addicted, and she just loves it. And I often joke. My father run the marathon. He was a very fit man, and I think I miss that gene. I don't get the feel good feels from the running. I get just the, oh my God, this is so hard.
Yeah, you don't get it straight away. In fact, you don't get it for weeks or maybe months after. So just keep going.
I should persevere. But yes, I would definitely be banging out the tunes if I was running.
Yeah, awesome. Vicky, thank you so much for giving us some of your time, and thank you for sharing a lot of knowledge and insights into the life that was Vicki O'Reilly. I hope to see more of you next time.
Thank you, Jane. Thanks for your time, and lovely to chat and see you.
Thank you. See you next time.
See you.
This episode of the Breadwinning Mums was produced by me, Jane Lim, and our theme music was produced by Sam McNally. We recorded this episode on the lens of Darug people who have passed their parenting story for generations. We pay our respects to the elders past and present and thank them for caring for country. Connect with us through LinkedIn or Instagram at Breadwinning Mums. Until next time.